We are live now.
Okay.
So greetings to everyone once again in this very new session of our webinar series. So let me start by saying that the session today concerns with a topic which is extremely prevalent nowadays, and it definitely needs to be addressed by some expert. And therefore, we have here with us Ms. Debjani ma'am today with us to throw some light on the topic of sexual harassment of women at workplace, Prevention, Prohibition and Redressal Act 2013, and how it works at the new normal workplace. So before starting the session, I would request the viewers to be very interactive so that we can turn this session to be extremely productive. So without much ado, let me introduce ma'am to one and all. Ms. Aich is currently a partner with the Bangalore office of Kochhar and Company. She is one of the main lawyers responsible for the firm's employment law practice, and she represents some of the world's largest information technology companies in relation to their India operations. She has a special interest in laws dealing with preventions of sexual harassment in the workplace and EEO matters, and also serves as the external member of the anti-sexual harassment committees of several clients. She regularly conducts workplace trainings on the employment laws and is a frequent speaker on the employment issues at international and national conferences and events. She is ranked lawyer in the legal who's who of employment. Ma'am has also been recognized as the next generation partner for labor and employment law 2020 by the Legal 500. So all I can say, ma'am, that it's an honor for us and a privilege for the viewers to have you here on the board with us. And I will be highly obliged, ma'am, if you will take over from now. Over to you, ma'am.
Okay, so first of all, thank you everybody for joining in. It's extremely daunting to be introduced as an expert in any matter. It makes me very nervous. I've never done a webinar before. While I've spoken, I've addressed many people and I've done a lot of training. It is extremely different when you are in front of a camera. I have no idea how many people are really listening to me, but thank you so much, Hemant and Legal Sarcasm Spreadlaw, for having me over. What I intend to do over the course of the next 45-50 minutes is, while I've got a bunch of slides running through, I am going to be speaking about, as Hemant mentioned, we are talking about the prevention of sexual harassment law in India, which is called, in brief, it's called the Posh Act. It's a very fancy name, but it's a very serious topic. And what I'm going to be speaking about is how this law works and how it works now, wherein most of, the workplace is moved. We don't have a regular workplace. We don't go into a regular workplace. A lot of us aren't going into a regular workplace. What's the new normal workplace? How does the law work in the new normal workplace? So what I'm going to do is walk you through what sexual harassment is as under the law, the definition. I'll go through a few examples. And then I'm going to talk about a little bit of the practical aspect as to what happens now. At any point of time, if there are questions, if you want to ask me something, I think Hemant's going to be routing. Hemant, you're going to be routing that through, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great. So that's the way it's going to go. And I hope you find it informative. I hope you have takeaways from it. So let's just get started. Hemant, we have the slides up?
Yes, ma'am. Just a minute.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to start nevertheless. So I don't know how many of you are aware of how long this law has been pending. But interestingly enough, and I'm very proud of the next slide, the genesis of the law dates back to a Supreme Court of India judgment in 1997, which is referred to as the Vishaka judgment. And it involved a very heinous rape case of an amazingly strong woman called Bhavani Devi. Is the slide show up, Hemant?
Yes, ma'am.
It is it? Okay, so I cannot see it. Is there any way I can see it? No? Okay,
ma'am.
That's okay.
Ma'am. Ma'am, if you can just there is a option right at the right bottom of the window. So if you can just click on it and change layout.
Okay, obviously this shows how terribly technologically challenged I am right now. It
Ma'am, there
is
is a
so much
three
easier with a projector screen.
there is a three dot
Okay,
option right at the right bottom of the screen.
I've got that. I've got change layout. What do I need? The sidebar?
Just a minute, ma'am. Ma'am, you have to select tiled. Sorry.
Okay, got it. All right, there we go. Brilliant. Okay, so if you notice that little picture that I've stuck in the corner, yes, it's a matter. I had a massive fangirl movement. The lady in the center is Bhavani Devi. She is very much alive, very much kicking, and one of the strongest women I have ever met. Based on whom we have such a strong, impactful, meaningful law. So, as our amazing, I mean, the government tends to wait for legislations to go through. This bill has been pending since we've had various versions of the bills, 2003, 2010. And then we needed something as ghastly as the Delhi rape case in 2012 for the law to actually come through. I think India needed something so terrible to happen when it realized that while we had the Vishaka judgment, which actually went on and said that sexual harassment at the workplace was an offense, sexual harassment at the workplace was a violation of the fundamental rights of a woman to work, to be able to earn her livelihood with dignity and respect. The Vishaka judgment said that each employer, including private sector companies, needed to have an internal committee in place which would take care of any issues of sexual harassment. We did nothing about it. We needed something we needed an event that shocked the moral conscience of the entire world for this law to come into place. Whatever it is, it's in place. It's a very, in terms of labor laws, it is a very short law. It has a lot of meaning, it has a lot of impact. There are massive gaps in it, which I will say. But the intention of the law is great. The law came into place along with the rules in December 2013. And interestingly, 16 years after the Vishaka judgment. We can move to the next slide, Hemant. So, whoever remembers civics back in school and social studies back in school or college, or if you have a humanities background, we talk a lot about fundamental rights. Fundamental rights come into play a lot nowadays because there are so many violations of it. While fundamental rights, like I mentioned, fundamental rights apply against the state, which is any government entity. But most companies in India will, have it percolate down by way of company policy. Why is it a big deal? That's something I always ask people. Why is sexual harassment in the workplace such a big deal? What's the issue? It's a very simple premise. When you go into work, whatever your space of work is, it could be something ranging from a domestic worker going into her workplace to assist people. It could be something as a top management executive going into work. But the expectation of each woman worker there, and I'm going to be talking about women because this law applies to women, the intention of this law, the intention is that women should be able to go to work. We don't want to get into work and feel nervous, scared, harassed, threatened. We would be able to earn our livelihood. We've worked very hard towards it, whatever your scale of work may be. And that's why sexual harassment is a big deal. That's why we need to make sure that it does not happen. We've had enough conversation about Me Too. We've had Me Too, we've had Wave 2 of Me Too come in, and it is so topical and it's so relevant. And we have Twitter feeds running and all of that stuff. But why is it relevant? Are we talking about something in the air? Or are we talking about something that's really real and very prevalent? Because sexual harassment is violating a woman's rights to dignity at work. It's such a simple response. It's such a simple premise. You should be able to come into work to be able to work. You should be able to come into work and be free to work and work with dignity and respect. That is the basis of this law. That is the intention of this law. And that is the way that it's structured. Whether it is, a old, I would say not an old stream, but a mainstream workplace, a physical workspace, or whether it's now the new normal. Okay, in the world, this is a global thing we're talking about. Nobody in the world saw employees move to remote working for close to 4.5 months in India, pretty much the same around the world. What is the workplace now? We had this law in 2013 or whatever, 1997, I'll say. We knew what the workplace was, but the world has changed now. What are we talking about right now? That's what I hope, the next 30 or 40 minutes we're going to speak about. I'm going to stop here. And then, I always say that I'm going to have to speak a little bit about legalese. What is sexual harassment? When I ask people what sexual harassment is, I often, especially, men or women, there's a sense of unease always across the world. People are uncomfortable speaking about it. I say that with 1.3 billion people in India, I'm assuming people have sex. And I'm assuming sexual harassment is a real issue here. So, when for the purpose of the law, what you need to know is sexual harassment has a precise definition. And when you are raising a complaint, or whether if you're feeling uncomfortable about something, know that when an inquiry takes place, the inquiry by it's called an internal committee, is constrained or is limited to work within the definition of sexual harassment as it appears under the Posh Act. So sexual harassment has an inclusive definition. And what is very important to remember, if you look at the slide right now, it talks about an unwelcome act or behavior directly or by implication. So key takeaway here, it needs to be an unwelcome act. It could mean a physical contact in advance. It could mean a demand or request for sexual favors, making sexually colored remarks, showing pornography. And the fifth subsection is in a very broad section that is, a catch-all subsection for a lot of sexual harassment complaints in my experience. It includes any other unwelcome physical, verbal, or non-verbal conduct of sexual nature. And I'm using my hands too much, but that's okay. What is important here to remember is that the act must be unwelcome and the act or action or conduct must be of a sexual nature. So I will talk a little bit about examples. We'll go through a little bit of it. I'll show you some stuff. While conduct may not be appropriate at the workplace, while conduct may not be okay, or it may be bullying, or it could be discriminatory, it could be gender discrimination, it may not fall within the purview of sexual harassment, and the lines can be blurred. And that's where the internal committee comes in to determine, when they get a complaint, to see whether it is workplace harassment, is it sexual harassment, is it sexual harassment flowing, or is the workplace harassment flowing from an incident of sexual harassment? So we've got the definition under the Posh Act now, and then we're going to be talking about circumstances which may also amount to sexual harassment. Hemant, can you go to the next slide, please? So, you've got the definition, and then we talk about circumstances. They're pretty easy in terms of breaking it down. It could mean a promise, explicit or threatened or implied, of preferential treatment in a woman employee's employment, a threat of detrimental treatment, which means worse treatment, a threat of a woman employee's status, her present employment status or her employment status. The fourth and the fifth one, again, are pretty broad. The fourth one is interference with her work environment or creating an intimidating or offensive or hostile work environment for the woman employee. And the fifth one is humiliating treatment likely to impact a woman employee's health or safety. You may think about situations, how bad can sexual harassment be? Can it actually impact her health and safety? You'd be surprised to know that it can. Also, this law applies not only to the private sector, but it also applies to the...
Ma'am, just a minute.
Yeah. Go.
I'm sorry for interrupting in between.
Sure.
Ma'am, can you just switch off your video for just once and then open it again, because there is a slight glitch, I guess.
Okay.
Just turn off your camera, ma'am, and open it again.
Any better?
Just a minute, ma'am. Let me check. Your audio is completely fine, but I think your video is lagging.
Okay.
Sorry for the interruption. It's just technical issue. Yes, ma'am.
Are we good to go?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. We can go to the next slide, Hemant, please. So here, what I want to do is spend a little bit of time talking about certain key aspects under the Posh Act, terms, definitions. I'm a lawyer, I have to do that. What it says is, employer, when we're talking about it from a private sector perspective, it is usually the person who is in control or supervision of the affairs of the company, overall, like the boss man or boss woman, as the case may be. Interestingly, employee has a very wide definition. It includes all of your mainstream regular workers. It also includes temp workers, contract workers, probationers, contract labor, and interns and trainees. So, students out there, if you're interning somewhere, do remember that you are covered under your company's in a posh policy. So, if you do face an incident, don't be scared to speak up because you are covered and you do have protections in place. And the law only talks about an aggrieved woman. It talks about a woman employee. So this is a gender protection law. Most companies in India usually have. Oh, wait, well, I wouldn't say most companies, but MNCs in India tend to have their posh policies gender neutral in line with global policy because sexual harassment is not limited to women. Sexual harassment extends to men. It extends to the LGBTQIA sector. It's all encompassing. So MNCs in India are very, very keyed into true inclusion and diversity. It's a space that I'm very heavily invested in. And most sexual harassment policies are gender neutral. The law, however, covers only women. We can go to the next slide. Now, this is where it becomes interesting. Historically, whenever I've come into these trainings, I talk about the workplace. I say this is the space we are in, your physical premise. It includes places that an employee may travel in the course of work, transportation, anything that the company is providing. It includes social events like any kind of social event, an office sponsored party. But what about now when we are all at home and I am on a webinar and Hemant is in his space and my clients are have their employees all over working remotely? What's the new workplace? Does the law actually cover this new concept of remote working? The answer is yes. No law across the world envisaged a situation of a complete lockdown. And luckily, the ambit of the definition of workplace under the Posh Act is broad enough to include any place visited by the employee in the course of work. We're not visiting home, we live here and we work here. So your workspace is now the new workspace is an employee's home. This makes it more interesting because how do we take care of sexual harassment here? How can I be harassed when I'm sitting in my study or at my dining table using my laptop or my cell phone? What happens now? Let's see how it works. Is my home the workplace? The answer is yes. What happens if I am, I say I live in Bangalore, but I'm working in Mumbai because I decided to take the first bus out, first flight out of Bangalore when lockdown ended. I wanted to go home, and I haven't let my employer know that. They don't know where I am in remote. I've logged in unless they're tracking my IP. Where am I? Where am I now? Is that the workplace? I'm going to talk a little bit about this. We can move to the next slide, Hemant. So let's talk first about examples. I find this very interesting because when you talk about sexual harassment and the way it's portrayed across mainstream media, the examples that you see, often you will have activities or acts or conduct that seem rather normal or are portrayed as being normal. But really, if you look at it very closely, they would amount to sexual harassment. I use an example often, and I use this. I use this example a lot. If anybody, and again, this is not without disparaging; it's a personal view. But if anybody has seen this movie called Kabir Singh, I think it's Rowdy Rathore in Telugu, um, and we were expected to believe that it was a lot of love. Would you really consider the gentleman's actions with the concerned lady in the beginning as affection? Or would you consider it creepy, stalking, scary, intimidating, something where she doesn't open her mouth to speak about? Is that really love? Or do mainstream movies choose us, let us believe that that's really mad love? Could the lady in question have filed a complaint of sexual harassment? My answer to that would be yes. So, that's where it comes from. A lot of times when I do these inquiries, I hear, but she didn't say no, or she didn't say stop, or I didn't know what she was saying, what she was thinking. It doesn't matter. You need to be aware. And when I'm saying you, I'm talking about from an employee's perspective. So, just in terms of examples, we have the standard examples coming close to somebody, stroking somebody. These are, so like I said, this physical, verbal, non-verbal, from a new workplace concept. Now we're not together. We don't have employees working together. How does this work out in the new workplace? We come to video. We come to video calls. We come to WhatsApp messages, text messages, and also social media. Work sexual harassment has moved away from the mainstream examples into the virtual world. Inappropriate behavior, comments passed during a work call or after a work call, whether it's a video call or if it's an actual telephone call, chats at inappropriate times, suggestions, comments about somebody's look, the way what they're wearing, could amount to sex. So, when I'm going to say, hey, you look fantastic. You look, if two colleagues are, it's not easy to be working solo. Everybody is missing human interaction right now. So it's very possible when I see somebody, it's like, oh, great, you look fantastic. You look really good. I love blue on you. However, if you said something along the lines of, I like the way the sari drapes your body, could I find that creepy or unwelcome? The answer to that would probably be yes. That's where the emphasis of why the Posh Act is relevant, why the Posh Act continues to be relevant, why it's really important for employers to be clued into this and to get the messages across. Because, so far we've had mainstream training. We haven't had training. We haven't had conversations about how does sexual harassment come into the new remote workplace. This is how it comes in. And you'd be surprised by the fact that these complaints are coming in still. And the numbers are pretty high. So the sensitization requirement becomes even more key right now. Conduct that is appropriate at the workplace, which includes your video calls, your telephone calls, your messages. You don't tend to text or WhatsApp a female colleague very late at night. It may not go down well, the same way that you would not like to be disturbed very late at night. If somebody is uncomfortable with something, don't keep asking that person or sending messages, emojis. Emojis are a key area you need to be concerned with. A smiley face emoji. I don't like emojis personally in official communication. But but again, we haven't been locked down. So I send smiley face. Sending a smiley face is great. Sending a kissy face, probably not. We all know that kissy face emoji. It's very cute, but let's not use that. Sexually offensive jokes, you may not find it offensive. Somebody else may find it offensive. And again, why? It's something. There's a slide. I've talked about this a little further on. It's something called impact versus intent. While sexual harassment is determined based on a lot of things, including the act, the actual conduct, the facts, the circumstances. What is very key is the impact on the recipient of the act. The first line of defense you will always hear in any sexual harassment inquiry is, I did not mean that. But I don't know what you mean. I know how I feel, and I felt awful. So that's what something that it sounds, I'm smiling when I'm saying this, but it's a really, really important thing for everybody to remember, whether you are part of the internal committee, whether you're part of an organizing body, whether you're you're talking about it elsewhere, whether you're a victim or whether you may have inadvertently also engaged in conduct that may have been offensive. Do remember that we are speaking about a simple aspect at work, which is respect. Anything that we construed as disrespectful has to be handled, especially in the written word right now, where a lot of communication is now written at the workplace. So that's something that is very important to remember. Don't cross a line which a reasonable human may construe as being sexual in nature. Go ahead and compliment your colleagues. They haven't seen you in a long time. But remember how you're complimenting them. You can always say you look nice. If the person says, thank you, I'd rather not hear that, stop it. Don't send good morning WhatsApp text messages continuously. Nobody likes that. Nobody, whether you're at work or anywhere, nobody likes that. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about social media. Is social media the workplace? The lines are blurred. Most companies have what is called a social media policy that speak about the do's and don'ts on social media. But what do you do when your line manager sends you a Facebook friend request and he's your boss and you accept it? What do you do then? And suddenly your line manager is liking pretty much every single post that you're making. Listen, nobody's that interesting in the world. I mean, truly, even your best friend or even your spouse, your partner, your siblings, though will never like anything. But nobody's going to really like and appreciate every single thing you post. So it's a little odd when your line manager starts liking everything. And can an employee actually raise a complaint about social media comments on Facebook or on Instagram? Snapchat is a killer. Snapchat things get erased and deleted. Everybody knows that. WhatsApp again, selective deletion of messages. How do you communicate then? My suggestion, my strong suggestion, in the new workplace, when we're talking about where we're really not meeting people that much, is let's stick to emails as far as possible. Let's stick to emails when we're talking about professional conduct. It's just a cleaner, easier way of communication. We can move to the next slide. Non-verbal conduct of sexual nature. You're in a video call. I'm smiling, you're smiling. Do I wink at you? Nah, I wouldn't say so. So again, when you're at the new normal workplace, do remember this is work and there is still a form of work attire also that is expected of everybody there. I know it's, a lot of places in India are really warm. You don't have air conditioning like you have at work. But would that then translate to be wearing something like a tank top or a singlet, or not wear a shirt at all during a call? Probably not. Not okay. It's interesting to see the possibilities that come in right now. At work, attire was never a big thing. But when you're working from home, maybe it can translate into making somebody uncomfortable. And that's something that employers need to think about, upgrading their attire policy. Nobody likes being told what to wear. But if you're on a video call with your colleagues, then a certain respectful, behavior, conduct, wear a t-shirt. That's okay. Online actions now speak louder than words. And that is another aspect that employers at the new workplace have to think about. Okay. This is what I talked about a little bit. I really like this little pyramid. It's called the perception pyramid. It's really what I feel. Now, in my head, I'm actually speaking. I'm speaking to a camera right now, but I'm assuming whoever is listening to me and is really not checking their social media right now. But it's possible you are. I believe that you are listening to me. So that is the impact that I'm having right now. Intention could be completely contrary. So that again translates interestingly in the new workplace. Somebody can say that I was just making a casual joke. Why is she taking it so seriously? She's taking it seriously because it is serious. No, I always say I'm not a party pooper. I would love to have, a great time at work. You spend 10 hours a day at work, and now you're spending 10 hours, 8 hours, okay, let me scale that, 8 hours, hopefully 8 hours, in front of a laptop. It's not an easy place to be in. And that's when companies need to start thinking a little bit more about how they can make sure that the mental condition and the mental space of their employees is okay. They need to start having more, regular weekly hangouts, calls, not just about work, but about how people are doing. Normally, you'd get a coffee in the cafeteria. That's not happening right now. Let's schedule a Friday call for everybody to get together and just like chat. It's okay. That also, helps in making sure that employees are in a better headspace, where hopefully they recognize the fact that their colleagues are still human beings and not people on the other, just another face on the other side of the camera. Okay. Okay, so just a few things for everybody to remember. The Posh Act has certain obligations on an employer. These are general obligations that are quantified under the law. You need to have a safe workspace that includes safety from people coming into contact at the workspace. You need to have your Posh policy in place. You need to remove underlying factors that may create a hostile work environment. So going back to my previous point of a hostile work environment, that's exactly what I was speaking about. Making sure that your employees are sensitized to the fact that in this new workspace, where the boundaries between your personal and professional can often get blurred, there has to be clear sensitization about what's okay and what's not okay. You have your Posh policy in place. It may need to be updated, upgraded to make sure that we're talking about the new workplace. That's really clear. If you see, look at the first, a safe working environment, but I'm working at home now. How do you take care of me? Say something happens where I'm working at home and then I am harassed by a delivery person at my home front door. Do I have a right to complain to my employer because I'm at work, but work is home? It's an interesting space and it's a gray space. There is no clear answer to this, but I will speak about this a little bit later. It's something, in fact, that I've been playing with. Luckily, I haven't come across a situation like that yet, but it may arise. What do we do then? Okay. Again, going folks who may not have an introduction into the law, and I've already spoken about this, every company has to have what is called every company with 10 or more employees have to have what is called an internal committee in place. It used to be called the Internal Complaints Committee. There was an amendment in 2017 or 2017, 2016, one of the two. A small amendment. It's now called the Internal Committee. And this committee is targeted at making sure that all complaints of sexual harassment at the workplace are addressed. The committee also has the responsibility to assist in creating an environment, a work environment that is that does not have hostile, that is not conducive to sexual harassment incidents. The committee it has to have a minimum of 4 members. It has to be headed by a presiding officer who is a senior level woman employee of the organization. 2 more members from within the company who have some experience in women's rights issues or have some experience working with social work, stuff like that. And then you have the 4th member, who is the external member, who who is usually engaged from the space of social work or is a lawyer or who has experience in handling sexual harassment issues. I always land up recommending getting a lawyer mainly because it makes sure that the employer is well taken care of, not only from a compliance perspective, but also from a best practices perspective. And most of us who are working in this space, for example, I've been working in this space for close to over a decade now. So I know some stuff. NGOs are a great resource also to draw people out, but they don't have the legal ability that they need, that you need to take care of your liability. Training. Now, when I talked about the general obligations of an employer, and when I'm talking about an employer, it goes right down to school, goes to colleges, it goes to everywhere, where you may be. You need to have training. A lot of companies have onboard training. They also have regular training. A lot of my clients make sure we have periodic trainings. But now the periodic trainings face to face is not going to happen. Take it on. Go virtual. It's okay. We can go virtual with easily over 1,000 employees. You just need to make sure that it's happening. And it becomes even more relevant now because, like I mentioned, human interaction is key. Online training just becomes a check off box. Nobody, it's people don't pay that much attention. So I feel that having a virtual training is not ideal, but at least a virtual training with a person is more relevant than an online training. That's my take on it. I just feel that the impact is a bit higher, especially if you have somebody who can, do a little bit of role play, get questions in, do polls, stuff like that. It truly makes a big difference. Also, upgrading, your internal committee has never handled a situation like this. I've had a bunch of Posh complaints and inquiries happen during the lockdown and then thereafter remote working. It's a completely new angle where you're doing everything over the video, over a video call, and it's extremely manageable. What is key then, again, are the same riders that would happen, training any internal committee. Again, making sure that you're respectful, you're neutral, you are clued in. All of those aspects apply to any Posh training, Posh inquiry that happen even in the virtual workspace. Okay. Just for your awareness, while employees or any aggrieved woman can raise a complaint to to an employer directly, they can also go down the she-box route, which is by the Ministry of Women and Child Development. The details are there. I'm not going to spend so much time because I want to talk about a little bit more stuff. Okay, this is where I'm going to be, look at the slide or else listen to me. I've talked about it. So I've given you some examples of how the workplace has expanded and instances of how sexual harassment can now occur. Now we're talking about how the internal committee is actually going to handle a complaint like that. The same process is going to apply as if you were doing a physical meeting. You come down to the basics and you follow the process under the POSH Act. This will include receiving the complaint, speaking with the complainant, getting her to provide a written complaint. In this case, it will be an email. Again, following due process, issuing a show cause notice on the respondent along with a copy of the complaint. The timelines need to be followed. There are timelines under the POSH Act. You need to send a copy of the complaint to the respondent within 7 days of receipt. The respondent has to be given 10 days within which he can provide his written response. Everything follows as is, but we are doing it virtually now. In companies which are still have which still has employees going in, then you continue to follow the same process. There is no difference in that, whether you're doing it virtually or whether you're doing it in real time at a physical office. The same way now, it becomes a little bit interesting when we talk about things like anonymous complaints or things that come to the ethics line. Those have always been tricky to handle, even when we're looking at physical meetings. The principles remain the same. We will still do the inquiry as per the POSH Act. It becomes a little bit trickier in the new workplace when you get a complaint, which is a third party complaint. That may become a little bit trickier to handle because you need to either have some form of evidence. Now evidence becomes a bit of an issue here. Screenshots, emails, go do whatever you need as the internal committee to look at it, figure it out, dig as much as you need to get the data you need, because the intention here is to resolve the complaint to the best possible extent. Third party complaints. Now, like I mentioned earlier, the new workplace. What do you do about the new workplace? Now, what the Posh Act says that where an employee is sexually harassed by a third party, the employer has to assist the victim in terms of support, in terms of helping her to file the FIR as the case may be. What do you do now? Can you actually extend the workplace to your delivery person coming in and harassing you because you are in the working hours but you're at home? No, this law has not thought. I mean, obviously the law hasn't thought this through, and so we're going to have to think about it. If an employee comes to you saying that this incident happened, will you ignore it? The answer is no, but it's also extremely personal right now. At the workplace in the previous circumstance, when we talked about third party harassment, it was quantified. You had people coming in mostly that were regulated. You would have somebody come into the reception or there would be a proper entry, exit. You could document all these things. There is no documentation, there's no quantification right now. So, this is something that employers will also have to think about and also examine how far you can stretch the definition of a workplace right now. Obviously, nobody's going to ignore it, but how much are you going to help this person here, even if it's an employee? It's something to think about. I'm quite curious to see how this is going to play out. I have not crystallized the idea yet, but these are my preliminary thoughts on it. Into the fact that A, it's obviously you can't ignore it. B, we're going to have to actually sit down and see, just because the incident happened during working hours, how much liability do we have? I'm not sure of the answer yet. I will have to think about it, but I wanted to throw it out there to see what we can actually do. Employers will have some incidental liability here. We will have to at least make sure that the employee is taken care of. You can't ignore something like this. And third party harassment is going to, the incidents are going to happen. So it's something that we need to factor into, the Posh policies now.
Just a minute, ma'am. So, ma'am, before moving forward, ma'am, actually, people are asking many questions. So, if we can address some questions, as you
Let's
have.
do that.
Okay, ma'am. So, basically, these questions are from the part that you have mentioned before, from these slides only. So, I'm actually having, ma'am, many questions. So, I'm going to shortlist some of them.
Okay, so if we run out of time, I'm not really sure how we do this, but let's take it. Let's do this. Okay.
All right, ma'am. So, ma'am, Vishruti Sahani wants to ask, can you share some examples of WFH posh experiences?
Okay, so when I was talking, so WFH is working from home. These are examples that I spoke about. Examples that I see are when a video call is coming in, you have a chat box wherein the conversation is going completely askew. That is something that has happened, and that is something that is very real. Another thing that I'm concerned about is inappropriate. Again, an example is inappropriate dressing during an office video call. Which is why I talked about it. That yes, I know it's home, and yes, I know that a lot of India is burning, and you don't have the lovely air conditioning that you have at work. But you can't come into office wearing a ganji. You would not go into office wearing a ganji. So those are a couple of examples of WFH sexual harassment incidents and complaints that we're seeing now. WhatsApp again is another place where you have there were most state laws have eight or 9 working hours. 10 hours, 11 hours. Do you send somebody a text message at 11 o'clock regularly? No, not okay. Could be weird. Yeah. Okay. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, ma'am. So, ma'am, we will be taking only one question more, and then we will be proceeding with the slides.
Okay.
So, because, ma'am, trust me, there is a lots of questions that people are asking right now. So, okay, so, ma'am, okay. So, ma'am, there was a question. Okay, so, ma'am, this person wants to ask, what changes would you like to suggest on the corporate policies of sexual harassment?
Oh my God. Okay. So that's like a wide spectrum. I touched upon a lot of them, but the first thing that you need to do is maybe amend your policy to include remote working as the workplace. While it's implied under the law and the assumption it's there, I would suggest amending it at a priority. Also, start including more examples of sexual harassment, remote sexual harassment, which will help employees understand it better. Uh, a get a training done, get a sensitization training done ASAP. While it's not an amendment to your Posh policy, but I would highly recommend getting an updated training done.
All right, ma'am. So, ma'am, we can continue with the slides now, and we will
Okay.
be redressing most of the questions by the end of this webinar now.
Okay. I'm keeping an eye on the time as well. I know this is something that we could spend about 3 or 4 hours speaking about, but let's keep it short for the time being.
Sure,
Now,
ma'am.
back to this whole thing about, what I was throwing out there. Now, the Posh Act talks about two situations where you need to report a criminal offense, which is sections 19G and H of the law. 19G says that you provide assistance to the woman if she chooses to file a complaint under the IPC. Section 19H says that you will initiate against the perpetrator, you meaning the employer, where the incident of sexual harassment took place. Now, just in terms of historical perspective, this again was a situation where the workplace was more or less a confined area. Yes, you had incidents that happened in the course of work, like transportation. We've had complaints that come in when an employee is traveling by road, by like public transport in terms of a bus or even on a flight. But again, those were quantifiable areas. Now the scope of the workplace is extended. So now companies will need to relook at as to how they want to handle this and whether you're going to draw the line between working hours versus non-working hours. Because if an employee is working late, stay outside regular 9 to 5, 9 to 6 working hours on a project, 9 o'clock at night, she's working and she's logged in, and an incident happens by a third party. What will you do? Can she come to you and ask you for help? She will come to you and ask you for help. But can you extend the workplace and extend, the entire concept of a workplace to that far? That is something that the ICs and employers will need to think about and need to actually address in the best possible way to make sure that employees feel safe. And that's another aspect that will need to be built into your Posh policy. How do you take care of these kind of incidents? Just in terms of this is, just in terms of his, again, I just thought it'd be relevant to put out here when we're looking at internal committees. Workplace harassment or sexual harassment. Now, when you're talking about workplace harassment, emails are key. An email under normal circumstances where folks had not been away from the workplace, could have come across as, being a stern email or an abrasive email or whatever. It could be a harsh email. What if the email tenor is so strong, or the email tenor is so strong over a few incidents, and a female employee raises a complaint saying it's creating a hostile work environment, and this individual also spoke to me very rudely, or spoke to me in an unprofessional manner, or spoke to me even if it's a boss in a hierarchical reporting structure, and it's because I hadn't gone out with him or hadn't agreed to have coffee with him before lockdown. These incidents are happening. These are things that, again, employers need to think about. It's the things that employees also need to think about. The tone and tenor used in workplace communication right now. It's a very simple premise, and that's something that everybody needs to remember. We're talking about respectful communication. Everybody can get mad at work. It's not very easy. I mean, trust me, I don't like this. It's not really normal for me to be sitting here and, nobody, everybody loves their coffee breaks. So everybody's under strange circumstances. That's when I feel employers really need to get their EAP systems really up and pay a lot more attention to the mental health of their employees right now. It's really, really critical. So that also, again, when you're looking at inquiry, again, I'm deviating a little bit from the topic, but these are issues that come up during the inquiry. Workplace harassment or sexual harassment? Is it a bunch of friends who are talking together? If it's a bunch of friends, again, now who are video calling each other or sending emails to each other, workplace emails, where does the line get crossed? Is it possible that the line gets crossed? And now nobody's used to this new normal. Under normal circumstances, if he was telling you, hey, let's go out, we'll catch a coffee, whatever, body language plays a whole part in that, right? But when you're sending out a written email, hey, let's catch a coffee, it may be construed differently. And that's why training again, sensitization becomes key. Again, things I'm just thinking, it's interesting to see this is evolving law. These are evolving scenarios across the world. It's not only India. These are things that we're talking about across the world. So when you're again, working together, you have to think about these things, including when you're doing an inquiry in a Posh Act. Yeah. Just for your awareness, all matters under the Posh Act are kept strictly confidential when there's an inquiry. So don't feel worried or scared about what may happen. I see a lot of reluctance for victims to come forward, speak to the committee or speak to the company. But please do, because if you don't let us know or if you don't report a complaint, the employer will not know. And not knowing means you're not going to get what you need, and you are protected. You have protections. That's really key for every woman and man and whatever gender you identify with out there to remember that it's really, really important to speak up. Don't keep quiet. If you keep quiet, it's going to work. Yeah. So just in case, just in terms of your background, in case an allegation of sexual harassment is substantiated, I prefer not to use the term guilty because I find it very onerous because the Posh Act is not a criminal act. So we're looking at what we don't have to prove beyond reasonable doubt. So there are various things that the law talks about. We talk about apologies, trainings, warnings, withholding of raises. That's not very common in my experience, and of course, paying compensation. The compensation aspect comes in because this law also deals with the unorganized sector from a practical perspective. Um, Private sector companies would be very circumspect in awarding any form of monetary compensation because it is something that can be misused. Right. Penalties 50K, crazy situation. If you do it twice over, you actually technically can use you meaning the employer can lose your business license. It's not going to happen, but it's something that employers need to remember. Yeah. Okay, I know that we're really running short on time, which is why I've rushed through a little bit of it. But let's open up for questions now.
Okay, just a minute now.
And guys, remember that I'm there. Hemant can root it out. My details are there. So if there's anything that you want to ask me, just write in.
Actually, people are actually asking that if they can get the PPT that you just shared with us.
Sure, I'm fine with that. Absolutely, it'll be there.
Okay, so
on the YouTube thing, it'll be running, right?
Correct, ma'am.
Yeah, so then it's up there in any case.
And the hard copy of the PDF, that's the responsibility of my team. I'll be providing it to you, so don't worry about it. So, ma'am, without much ado, let's just proceed towards the question now.
Yeah, let's do that. Yeah.
All right, ma'am. Okay, ma'am. So, sorry, ma'am.
Go ahead, Hemant. Go ahead.
Yes, ma'am. So, Kamal Anand wants to ask, can you throw some light on Posh vis-a-vis co-working space where there are employees of various entitles? What should be the responsibility of the employer as well as the owner of co-working space?
Okay, interesting. Now, this is something again I've been thinking about. Now, when you are at a co-working space, you are firmly under your employer's policy. The co-working space again has a duty if it has, if it has 10 or more employees, to definitely have your internal committee plus your Posh internal committee in place. It needs to have a mandatory Posh policy. Now, what I mentioned is an aggrieved woman can raise a complaint. So, very strictly speaking, if there was an incident at a co-working space between two individuals who belong to conflicting to opposite employers, surprisingly, and if you did a strict interpretation of the law, the co-working space policy, Posh policy, oh my God, that's a tongue twister. The co-working space Posh policy would apply. But again, from a practical perspective, while the policy may apply, and because the incident has happened at the co-working space, the co-working vendor has no control in terms of disciplinary action over either of the invested party, both of the interested parties. So it again boils down to the respective employers. If a female victim raises a complaint, yes, she can go to the co-working space vendor. She should reach out to her employer and let her know that this has happened. The employer will then route the complaint through its IC to the concerned other company's IC, and will also request the co-working space to provide the cooperation to the extent possible for the inquiry. It's a bit of a convoluted answer, but that's where I think it's going to happen. It's the same situation where we're talking about a contract worker situation, just in a remote environment now.
All right, ma'am. So, moving towards the next question, ma'am. A person wants to ask, are there any judicial interpretations which help on the meaning of new workplace?
Not yet. Want to create one? Not yet. Not under Indian law, not that I'm aware of. I may be completely wrong in that, but I haven't seen any case. First of all, the courts have been shut. From where will it come? Yeah.
Correct.
The courts aren't working at all. They're only looking at really urgent matters, and I think we'd have to look at guidance on the from European precedents for this, because that's a highly evolved area. I would probably look at EU judicial precedent for something like this for guidance.
All right, ma'am. So the next question is, what's your view on jail harassment, prison
I'm
harassment,
not a
basically?
criminal lawyer, okay? Now, let's first of all premise one. Debjani Aich is not a criminal lawyer. I don't charge as much, but I'm happy to go down that route if you think about it. Now, jail harassment, is jail a workplace? Are you talking about between two inmates? So again, this is not a workplace; they're in jail. So the jail rules will apply. Is my reasonable estimate of how it would happen. However, if it's between police individuals or jail employees, or who are employees of of that service, I don't even know what it's called, that's still the workplace for them. So all of these government entities have sub rules or have rules, internal rules that regulate them, service rules and conduct. You would have to look at that read with the Posh Act when we're talking about folks who are working in the jail versus inmates.
Okay, ma'am. So Kalpana Rat wants to ask, who is supposed to deal with the complaints of sexual harassment? Do we need to approach the HR or management? And continuing to that, how can I know the committee will fair, or that the harasser can't influence the committee?
Kalpana, you said.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. While the first line of contact could be your HR or your line manager, or the company, ideally your company should have an internal committee in place, and those details of the committee members should be available to all employees. It's either on the intranet, it should ideally also be displayed where all the other labor law legislations are. It's usually what they say at a conspicuous place. It's usually where all your other labor law legislations are. Check your cafeteria, your manager's room, they'll be stuck up there. Stuck. It's literally a paper pasting. And there should be flyers around. Now, ideally, if you can avoid speaking to your HR, try and speak to the IC directly. If you're uncomfortable with that, speak to your HR or your BP and the business partner, as the case may be, and ask them to route you to the IC. No fear in how the IC works is because you have to have faith in the system. And when I talked about the general obligations of an employer, that's where it comes in, that the requirement to make sure that sexual harassment is not an issue and the workplace is a safe place has to come from the top. Also, just for your awareness, the reason you have an external member on the IC is to make sure that that individual is completely neutral and there is no possibility of bias. Because you have one person. Now, there are a lot of complications. I mean, there are a lot of procedural aspects involved, including a unanimous sign off of the report at the end. When you've got one absolutely independent person, you have to have faith in that person. Not only in that person, in the system. That's how you ensure the neutrality. Okay.
All right, ma'am. So the next question is, ma'am, what about threatening? If a boss threatens his female employee, then can she complain about it?
Who is that an anonymous question?
Yes, ma'am. It's anonymous.
Okay. Now, is the threat one? So going back to the definition of sexual harassment, is the threat one which is of a sexual nature? If the answer to that is no, then it could be workplace harassment. If the threat is coupled with anything else, which may be an unwelcome act or conduct of sexual nature, then it could be sexual harassment. It depends upon how the threat is worded and whether it's related to anything else.
All right, ma'am. So, ma'am, we have two more questions now.
Okay.
So, Avnita Joshi wants to ask, since employers have personal stake in the end result, how is fairness maintained? And I think you have already answered that.
Okay, so again, Avnita, what I'm going to say is employers have a personal stake involved in making sure that the workplace is clean. If you're working in a space where you believe that the works where it's skewed, or there really isn't a genuine commitment to making sure that all genders are protected, then that's not a great workplace to be in. You need to get out. Really, I'm not telling you. Okay, do not tell me. I'm not saying quit, but think about it. Do you want to be in a place where you don't feel safe? Yeah.
Yes, sir. So, ma'am, Pranjal Sharma wants to ask, in the current situation with limited resources, should organizations be held for not providing training or guidelines with respect of new workplace?
One of the requirements under the Posh Act is to have regular trainings not only for the employees but also for the internal committee. And these details need to be mentioned in the annual report that is filed with the regulatory authorities at the end of the year. So the requirement for training continues as is. The fact that we have a new workplace really is not relevant. You still need to do the trainings. I would say when you're doing the trainings, expand the scope.
Okay, ma'am. So, I think we should stop the questions now because
I know we're
it's
completely out of time.
yes, ma'am. So, ma'am, just to wrap up, ma'am, can you please just give a final piece of advice to the audience who are viewing us and concerning like most of the people who are watching us today are law students only. So, ma'am, what will be your final piece of advice for them?
Speak up. Speak up and don't be disrespected anywhere. It's not funny. It's not fun. So if you don't stay all over, I'll speak about my example. I have been sexually harassed at school. I mean, at school meaning at the bus stop while waiting. After my tuition class, we were waiting at a bus stop and somebody's going to pass. Somebody passed by and passed this nasty comment, and I cried because you're class 12 and you go home and you cry to your mom. But that made me also realize at that point of time that it's not okay to cry, right? I mean, that didn't solve anything. If I turned around and addressed it, it would have helped. I would have felt better because you feel dirty. Um, Kids, just remember, speak up if you're uncomfortable. Don't think everything is okay. You don't have to keep quiet, and you're not going to be vilified because you're speaking up. There are bodies that are there to help you, protect you, whether you're kids, whether you're law school students, whether you're at work. But if you don't speak up and if you keep quiet, it's a chain that is going to continue. It will not be broken. Respect at school, at college, at work, gender equality are key aspects that you need to remember. You are a deserving. You're there for a reason. Wherever you are, if you're at college, whether you're at work, you're there for a reason. Don't let anybody distract you from that reason. And be respectful, be nice. Don't be just be nice. It's a very very simple premise. Just be nice.
Okay, ma'am. So with that, I guess we have come up to the end of our session today. It was a wonderful experience listening to you, ma'am, and it was sure an honor to host you in this session. And on the
Thank you
behalf
so
of
much.
my whole society, ma'am, and legal sarcasm, of course, I want to thank you for accepting our request and enlightening our viewers along with my team and me. It was a wonderful experience having you, ma'am.
Thank you very much,
Thanks a
Heyman.
lot,
Much
ma'am.
appreciated, guys. And like I said, you know where to find me.
Yes, you guys can approach ma'am on LinkedIn if you want. Uh, she is available on LinkedIn, but don't flog onto the on her DMs and all. So to the viewers, we are receiving a great response on our constitutional tournament as well. So if you haven't
Great.
checked it out yet, the link is in the description, and make sure that you don't let yourself out of this opportunity, as well as we are having a huge cash prize for that say. Moreover, thank you all for being here. It was a lovely experience, and thank you for being so interactive, and we will meet you soon with another session. So thank you, ma'am. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank
All right.
you. Bye bye. Bye bye.